2. We are sitting here talking about distinctivelychristian.com, these books. I'm Anne-Marie Gosnell from Future Flying Saucers Resources, and I'm here with Joy Wendling from Created to Play, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about herself in just a minute. But I wanted to remind you, if you haven't watched session 1, make sure you go and do that, where we talk about purpose and mission and vision for your ministry at your church, no matter what age you're a part of. So go check that out. It's with Joshua Zenlow, so you don't want to miss that. But we are in session 2 here. Joy, I'm so glad that you're here with me.
Hi, yes.
We are going through, so those of you who are joining us, we are doing Distinctively Christian, the elementary version and the preschool version. And I'll put links to how to get those down below. But I want you all to meet my friend Joy, because she's fantastic. And there's a reason why there's a reason why she's here today, because of what she's fantastic with. So tell us a little bit about you and Created to Play.
Hi, I'm so thankful to be here. I'm really excited. My oldest daughter keeps telling me that I'm famous because I'm having this conversation with you. I was telling her about it. She goes, "Oh, mommy, you're going to be famous." I said, "No, not quite, but."
Yeah, no, not quite. I hate to break it to you.
So I am a mom of 5 girls. I've got a 9-year-old, 5-year-old twins, a 3-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old. So I am busy at home, but I have also been in ministry for about 20 years. Right now, I'm doing ministry from home because I keep adding kids, and so wanted to take some time off from being in a church. But I did serve in several churches in doing children's and youth and family ministry. I've also started a Christian preschool, and I started a Christian daycare as well.
Wow.
Yes.
That I didn't know, so that's exciting. That's
Yes.
going to go right into our conversation for today. That's so
yes. Cool. The preschool is still running strong at a church that I went to and worked at a few years ago, and then but the daycare was just me. So when I moved to open the preschool, the daycare closed. But and so I have a master's in youth, family, and culture from Fuller Theological Seminary. And I love equipping kidsmen leaders, and also especially parents,
yes.
to disciple kids.
Yes.
And so that is what I love to do. And I do that on a blog called Created to Play, and also on my podcast called Playfully Faithful Parenting.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Because see, we, especially with Future Flying Saucers, I've got the Bible Creative Conference that really pulls together the worlds of Christian parenting, homeschooling, Christian education, and children's ministry. And the Future Flying Saucers really wants to focus on equipping parents and church leaders and volunteers. And so I just love your heart. So I just love it when we can mush together and work together and share things that are important. And I really feel like our session today is super, super important.
I agree.
And the reason why I say that is a story that when I was knee deep in children's ministry, and it was actually, this is from my husband, but he was helping in the ministry that I was helping to run, and he would come to me with all these questions. He's like, well, why is this? He was in the kindergarten class, and he's like, well, why do these kids do this? Well, or why can't they do this? And once I kind of explained, like, the biggest thing for him was he didn't understand that first and second graders, kindergartens and first graders aren't going to be able to play games with rules very well, because they just don't think that way. And so, like, for him, that light bulb went off. He was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And so he wasn't so frustrated as a teacher anymore because he did try those types of activities with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's why understanding faith stages and play stages and developmental stages, which that's going to be a couple sessions down the road, because I'm going to have Dr. Jones from Cedarville is going to come on and talk about developmental stages of children. So stay tuned for that.
Exciting.
Yeah. But today we're focusing on faith stages and play stages. So in the books, they go into, now the preschool one really focuses on the first 2 to 3 faith stages, but the elementary book really goes into all 8 rather well. So I'm not going to like go into a lot of detail, because if you have the book, you can go read it. I don't, but like the very first one, like in our nurseries, Joy, don't you agree that even in our nursery, a lot of ministry can happen, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
because they have from age 0 to 2, they have this a primal faith. It's like a foundational faith where they learn that they are safe and that they're going to be well taken care of. And so we're going to, in a little bit, we're going to go into some practical ways. Joy's got some cool things that you can do, just even in baby nursery, or if you're a new mom or a seasoned mom and you've got a brand new baby, things that you can do to even help start building their faith when they're 1 year old, 2 years old. At ages 3 to 7, children begin going through an intuitive, projective faith, impressionistic type faith, where they're going to learn more through hands-on experiences. Like they're going to remember. It's going to be the biggest impact. So, Joy, let me ask you, what is your biggest memory as a kid when it comes to Christmas?
Oh, I think walking in to our living room and seeing everything,
Yeah.
and I think part of it is the ritual of it over and over.
Like,
And so
Christmas is coming, right?
yes, yes. And I know, like just this anticipation because it was repeated each
Yeah.
year. And
Right.
so every year I came in to the living room and I knew there were going to be presents. And then I knew my grandparents were going to come and I knew what we were going to eat for breakfast. And we had like this, family ritual
Right.
that it created a story, and it that's because it's not just one particular year. I think it's that
Right.
that combination of ritual and them telling the same stories and them saying the same things every year.
Right. And I grew up in a home where we did Advent every year.
Mm.
So I knew as soon as the Advent wreath came out, like, oh, we get the countdown to Christmas. Like that was
Yes.
a huge excitement. And and I knew that each week we were going to talk about Jesus, some aspect of Jesus's birth. I knew that when Easter came around, yeah, the white shoes came out. My dad had to polish them, right? Back
Yep.
in the day. And you didn't wear white shoes until Easter, but it was like those rituals. Like those are the types of things that are big for kids ages 3 to 7. They need those holidays, the rituals, the knowing what's coming, and we can totally tie it into Jesus. And
Yes.
so when we tie those rituals into Jesus, it helps form that foundational faith that builds them and gets them ready for the next phase, which is narrative faith, which is where they can really start understanding who came first, in the Bible. Like they start learning that Bible narrative. And, I love using object lessons because they're beginning to think more logically and they're beginning to make interpretations and connections between things and people. And they're learning, okay, so this is when you can actually talk through a genealogy, in scripture, and they'll be like, oh, I recognize that name, and they start making connections. Like, how many times have we as parents and even teachers skipped the genealogy section because we're like, oh, it's so boring,
Yeah.
But when you start reading through it and the kids start picking out the names that they've just gone through Old Testament and you're cycling through, they're like, oh, that person was in Jesus's family? No way, and they start making those connections.
Yes.
And by the age of 9, supposedly research tells us, right, that by the age of 9, most kids have their spiritual and moral foundations in place by the age of 9. So I think that's one reason why these faith stages and what we're going to go into with these playstations is stages, not stations. You can make them playstations though in your church though. We'll talk about those, I'm sure. But it's so vital for us to teach in ways that are age appropriate. And this is this type of stuff Bible teachers need to know. Once they've gone through this narrative, then they start hitting that middle school age, right? Age 12-ish, right? 12 to 18 is when they really start questioning. And this puts a lot of Bible teachers on edge because they're like, oh no, they're going to ask a question that I don't know the answer to. Parents feel this same anxiety too. Oh no, I'm not going to be able to answer. But during this time period from age 12 to 18, it's so important to allow them to ask their questions because they're making their faith their own. Like, they've got to figure it out. And once they figure it out and push on to maturity, then they can move on with there's 3 more levels of faith development. But like, these are the ones that are so vital. And especially in the infant preschool ages, which I'm going to hand it over to Joy here because she's going to tell us about the play stages that are so super important because kids learn through play. So could you unpack that for us and help us to know, because this is going to be those first 2 developmental stages of faith. And, like anything, it's building blocks, right? So
Yes.
if something is not quite jiving on the lower levels, then the upper level, it's going to be harder, right? So
Yes.
Unpack these play stages for us.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, first, just what you're saying is one of the things that I think is so important with childhood and these first few years, is because in those first few years, our kids' brains are growing and expanding and making connections, and play is such a part of that. Yeah. And so when we can add faith in to what seems like the everyday bits of life, we can add faith into these connections in their brains. And so when they get to be older and start questioning that, words that they've heard in the Bible, vocabulary words, even oh yeah, I learned that word in the Bible. And oh, I was counting when I was reading a Bible story with my mom, and we can build faith into these things. And that helps that foundation that just makes it, that, really has it built into the connections in our kids' brains. And so that's why I think these first few years are so important, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And so there are these 6 stages of play that kids go through, at different speeds, right? But it's typically the same order.
Yeah. And that was one thing I didn't think to mention at the beginning, is even with the faith stages as well, everybody's going to be in a different, nobody grows at the same rate, right? Even our spiritual maturity is at a different rate. So everybody's going to be, and that I think is one reason that makes teaching so difficult, especially if you have a classroom that has a wide variety of ages, then you've got a wide variety of stages that you're kind of looking at too.
Yes. Well, and even the nursery has a wide variety of stages because they change so much in these first 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always say that the ages are about an ish. So
yes.
0 to 3 months ish.
Right.
Kids are in what's called an unoccupied play stage. And this, I think, especially for like first time parents or people who may not have kids and are serving in the nursery, they are like trying to get their kids to play with toys.
Right.
But the baby just wants to lay there and play with his toes or eat his fingers.
Right.
And first time parents or teenagers who are serving in the nursery or, you know, other volunteers who may not have been around babies much are going to try to get the babies to play with toys, but that's not their interest yet.
Right.
They are really just exploring kind of what's right around them and their own bodies and examine and explore and learn about, you know, who God made them to be and who they are out in this world. And so it's just called unoccupied play, but it's only for a few months.
And it doesn't last very, like, that's why peekaboo is so fun.
Yes.
Like a little kid, because like a little baby, because they really honestly think you're not there.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you know, you can say, oh, peekaboo, right? And they like giggle and laugh or whatever. But in our process of doing those things, we're showing that they can be trust that the adult is going to come back.
Absolutely.
Like, Jesus is someone that we can trust, you know, so there's these little things that we can do.
Yes.
What's next?
And then after that is solitary play. And so this is 0 to 3 months starting ish to about 2 years, somewhere in there. And I don't have research to back this up except for my own kids, but I found when you have more kids in your family that solitary play ends earlier.
Yeah,
and
I would agree.
they move through faster.
They want to be with their older brothers and sisters, so they're like, forget that, I want to go there.
Yes. But I think this is a stage that often worries people who don't understand the stages. My kid doesn't want to play with anyone, or this new kid is in the nursery and just wants to sit by himself and, you know, isn't engaging with other kids. And it's so normal. And it's just where they want to play by themselves and explore by themselves. And and that's completely normal.
Right. And this is why, at least I have found, like when you're setting up your nursery, you kind of need to have a large set of blocks, because you may have 2 or 3 kids playing blocks. They're not playing with each other, but they're all playing blocks. Or you need to have 2 sets of doll houses. So one kid will be playing a dollhouse, you know, and the other one, but they won't be playing with each other. And that's why you have to have, you know, Matchbox cars. You've got to have, you know, more than one, because, or you will have fights over things, you know. So just having more, because you've got to understand that their kids are not going to necessarily engage with each other, but kind of they are, because they'll mimic each other. And that's what's kind of cool about solitary play, because they're there, but they're not.
And they're and developmentally they should not, but they probably are not sharing or taking turns.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to them.
And if there is a toy or an activity that they are really focused on, they can just play with it possibly the whole time they're in the nursery. And so we don't need to kind of like force our littles to interact or share, because it's not going to make sense to them.
Right. And again, that's going to cause more frustration in the classroom, teacher-wise and kid-wise. And that's what we
Yes.
don't want. We want peace in the classroom so that good
Right.
teaching can take place.
Yes. And there are, you know, parents who don't know that as well. And so if we are equipped with this information as volunteers and leaders, then we can also help parents during pickup and drop off. And, you know, by not shaming a kid for not being willing to share or for not playing and that kind of thing. Not that we would intentionally shame a kid, but, you know, I've heard people say, oh, you know, Sally wasn't sharing. Maybe you could talk to her about that for next week. Well, no, it's not going to help.
To expect her. Now, that doesn't mean that we as teachers don't model that behavior. We definitely need to model that behavior because they need to learn how to share.
Right.
But it's not something that's going to be a developmentally appropriate thing to not understand at this moment of time.
Right. And especially like first-time parents, if they were to hear something like that at pickup, could feel, you know, really shameful and guilty and like, oh, they don't want my kid in the classroom. And so when we can understand what we should be expecting, you know, both developmentally and in play stages, then we can help equip parents and to, you know, encourage parents during those times.
Yeah, because we definitely don't want parents to think, oh, my child is a problem child, when really they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing at that age.
Yeah. I love in what is the First Corinthians when Paul talks about, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. And then, you know, and then he put away childish things, but it's not a bad thing. Like he wasn't insulting childhood. Like I think when we can understand this beautiful and purposeful stages that God has created, it can help us as leaders and parents to come alongside kids where they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what's next?
So then is onlooker play. And so that's when our kids around 2-ish start watching how other kids are playing. And they're not going to move closer to them or be intentional, but they start to become curious of what's going on with other kids. And we as adults can go back, and as older kids, they can go back and cycle through. I mean, think about, you know, sporting events. That's onlooker play. We love to watch other people playing a game. Or, you know,
I
even
want to
people
go do
watching.
it myself. I'll just watch.
So that's onlooker play, and it's a healthy thing, and it starts the kids' curiosity.
And I these are kids like I've had in my classroom when I was teaching preschool, that these are the kids that sometimes you think, oh, well, they don't want to be a part of the class. They just kind of want to go sit off by themselves, but they're watching everything that is going down in that room. And they know what's going on.
They're watching, they're listening, they're observing,
learning, they're figuring out if this is a safe place. Can I trust these people? You know, and again, it may take some kids longer in this stage than others. It just kind of depends.
Because around 2 also parallel play can start. And that's when kids are playing the same thing and next to each other, but not playing it together. And so both kids might be doing Play-Doh at the same time, but they're not doing it together, or they're doing blocks, but one is building Jericho and the other is building a cross, you know, and so it's not necessarily together, but it's starting to get a little bit closer to playing together.
Okay, so I misspoke then. I was thinking that, what was the second stage?
The second one is solitary play.
Solitary. So I was thinking that solitary was parallel. And so there's a difference.
Yes.
So, okay. So for those who might be confused, like I was, so the solitary play really is them just really playing by themselves.
Yes.
Like nobody's really doing the same thing. They're all kind of doing their own.
And so their focus is different. With solitary play,
Right.
it's just they're focused on just themselves and the toy, where then onlooker play, they start to pay attention to what's going on. And then parallel play is, I'm going to move a little bit closer to you and pay attention to what you're doing. And maybe I might integrate some of that, but we've got different goals for what we're playing.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So that would be like, what age would that be ish?
That can start around 2.
Around 2. Okay, so this would be like in your 2s and 3s class.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
wow.
it could be a little bit older because the onlooker play also starts around 2. So, it's going to be dependent on
Sure.
your kids.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yes.
Okay, what's after parallel then? So they're playing Play-Doh together, but not together.
Right. And then, and they could also be playing 2 different things, but they want to be kind of close to people with the parallel play. Okay. So it's just kind of their focus. They're getting a little bit closer and closer to each other.
Right.
And then is around 3 to 4-ish is associative play.
Okay.
And this is when they kind of start playing together, but still not with common goals. Okay. So like if they're on a playground, they could be swinging, one could be climbing, one could be sliding. They're playing together, but still not with a common goal or a common set of rules.
Okay. Right, because rules don't go there yet.
Yes.
Like there's no
yes.
no idea of rules.
Yeah. Like
do their own thing.
Right. They might be, if they're doing dramatic play of some Bible stories, one's in the Old Testament and one's in the New Testament, but they're still in the same game together, Yeah.
So the word that you used was goal. I think that is the key to actually understanding like where any kids in your classroom might be is like, okay, so what is the goal? What is this child really trying to do? Which means we've got to pay attention, don't we?
Yeah.
We kind of need to pay attention to how they're playing,
right.
So that we can then, which we'll get into in a little bit, like actually teach faith things to them age appropriately.
Yes.
So, okay, so is there anything after associative then?
And then the last one is cooperative play. And this can start around 4 at the earliest, usually, and then it goes on. And they just keep getting better and better at that, hopefully. And that is where they can have a common goal and, make some common rules that they'll all follow and that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So with all of this in mind now, so we've got faith stages, we have play stages. What do we do, Joy, with all this information? So we're we're a teacher, and let's just start with baby nursery. So we're a volunteer in baby nursery, or we're a brand new parent. Yeah. What types of things can we do to develop faith in our babies, in our littles?
Yes. So play wise, I think serve and return is going to give you the most bang for your buck with the littles, especially. And that's just kind of interacting back and forth. It could be the peekaboo, it could be smiling back and forth, but really paying attention to the child's cues and responding back to them. So it's you can imagine hitting a tennis ball back and forth. And so if the child looks at you and gives you a silly face, you can look back with a kind of silly face. If they're smiling, you smile, repeating noises back and forth. And you can look at picture books together, but it's about that helps to build that relationship. And also, one of the things that I love about Serve and Return is kids are starting to look at what makes other people happy. And this person that's caring for me, am I making them happy? When I make them happy, they smile and they are picking up on those cues, and then they'll repeat it and do it over.
Right.
And because they are enjoying making someone else happy, they're blessing their caretaker.
Right.
They feel blessed. And so then they do it again. And that's what builds connections in their brain.
Right.
And as they repeat something over and over because they're enjoying it, it's becoming deeper built into their brain. Right. And so that's, with play, the beauty of play is that kids are having fun doing it. So they automatically want to do it over and over, which just builds those connections deeper into their brain. And that can go on for all of the ages as we find ways to play with our kids doing faith things. If they are really enjoying it and into it, it's deepening that connection in their brain.
Right.
And so
it's not like it's we're going to do this to entertain. Like, it's not that motivation. It's it's kids really are growing and developing their brain connections physically. Like it's a growth thing when they're playing. And so if we take our little 2s, 3s, 4-year-olds and expect them to sit on a dot for 10 or 15 minutes to watch a video or to listen to a story, like that's not play. That's not going to build those connections. No. Not that there's anything wrong to reading a story. Absolutely not. But we've got to make it, maybe it needs to be like a little board book that's, done in 30 seconds versus, and again, it's that age appropriate. Like a 4-year-old will be able to sit for a 5-minute story or even a 10-minute story versus a 2 or 3-year-old, which most probably will not be able to do that.
Right.
Which means sometimes we've got to really assess our classrooms, like how they're set up. So that's baby room.
Yes.
So let's move into like the 2s and 3s classroom or bedroom or whatever it might be.
Yes.
We need to keep in mind now. We can like environmentally, teaching. What do you think?
So I love to say we can add faith to play and add play to faith. So it can go 2 ways. We can look at what kids already enjoy playing. So if they enjoy playing with blocks, then we come in and we see them playing with blocks and say, oh, you are building a really strong tower. Look at that tower. It's so strong. That reminds me, in the Bible, God is called a strong tower. Why do you think God might be called a strong tower? And so that's adding faith to play. That's what they're already doing.
Right.
And then you can add play to faith, which would be more of, I come in with, I've got, a Bible story that we're going to do, and we're going to add some play to it. But I think it's with that, even in a classroom, remembering that like true play is child-led and not just entertainment. It's what do they want to explore and learn? And that's what's going to, cause them to repeat it and cause those things in their, the connections in their brain to deepen and strengthen.
Yeah.
And so I think I learned from a friend, she talked about 4 toys that she put in every Sunday school classroom. And she said, with those 4 toys, you can do any Bible story. And so, in this 2 to 3s, this is a great place. So the 4 toys are a set of blocks, a doll, a basket, and a set of animals.
Set of animals. Okay,
And
got
so
that. So a basket. Okay, wait. A
Yep.
basket, set of animals, a doll, and blocks.
Blocks, yes.
Okay.
And then you can think about all the stories that you can do. The basket could become a boat.
Moses and the bulrushes.
Yes, you could
Okay.
do, yes, you could put the baby in the basket, and then, he's in the river, and you could talk about that. You can, the boat or the basket can become a boat, and you put the animals in it, and then it's Noah's Ark.
Right.
You can build Jericho's walls. You can, talk about the nativity with Jesus as a baby. There are just so many.
About creation with all of the animals and
with
how
the
they're
animals.
all different.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You can build, some tables and talk about when Jesus was angry in the temple and flip over little block tables. There's just so many things that having those simple toys allows the kids to use their imagination and become more playful in that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so that's our 2 and 3-year-old classroom.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's move into preschool, 4s, 5s. So a little bit more sophisticated, right?
Yes.
And so we're moving more into the associative.
Associative.
That's it. Associative. And what was the
Cooperative.
next one? Cooperative play. So we're moving more into those now.
Yes.
Okay, so again, thinking teaching at home, teaching at a church, environmentally, what types of things do you think we should do?
I love prayer stations for this age. Just super creative prayer stations that you set up maybe for a whole month. You have 2 to 3 activities at the beginning of the month, or maybe even at the beginning of each time. You can show kids how to use them and then give them space to use them either how you plan to or with their own creativity.
Some of them are gonna do their own, some of them will do their own thing.
Yes.
It just will.
And yes. I think sensory bins at this age are great. And you can set those up around Bible stories or concepts. And also like dramatic play is a great thing. And okay, I'm going to say something that might rub some toe. Is it rub toes? Is that what is? Step on toes. Yeah.
There you go.
I don't love crafts for this age.
Oh, me too. Can I just say,
So I would highly recommend tons of art supplies.
Right.
But blank paper.
Yes. And not cut and paste.
No.
Like because already done stuff. No.
Yes. And nothing where you show one example and say, this is what it should look like. Because God is a creative God. Yes. And he created our littles to be creative as well. And I think when we give our kids the space to be creative and to explore what the Holy Spirit is doing in them with a story, that it is going to be, it's going to be more true play. It's also going to go into their heart instead of just their head.
Yes.
And it's a reflection of who God is in being able to practice that creativity.
Yes.
And so there are some kids who enjoy crafts. And so maybe having that as an option, or enjoy coloring pages and have that as an option. But I am so much more of the, okay, we've read about Jesus feeding the 5,000. Here's some art supplies. Why don't you respond with what's going on? Instead of, here's a picture of some fish and loaves, color this and remember.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And see, and I would love to take that and extend it into the elementary classroom,
Yes.
because again, for me, it's like, okay, step on toes moment. I don't like coloring sheets and I don't like workbook pages.
Yes. Yes.
Um, workbook pages have their place. They have their place and they can be useful. However, there are so many other ways we can use our time, especially at church when you probably only have those kids for an hour a
Yeah.
week. Why in the world would I ever want to give my kid a workbook page for 10 minutes when I could actually do something interactive with that
Yes.
child? Um, because again, we need to do things age appropriately. Through even elementary kids are still growing in these stages. And I highly recommend sensory bins in kindergarten, even
Yeah.
maybe into first grade, because at this point, remember, they're moving into that narrative. So they're going to take a dramatic play station. They're going to take a sensory play station with, you get all you need to do to make, some of you may not know what sensory boxes are. If you go to the Future Flying Saucers Pinterest boards, I have a whole board for sensory boxes there. So make sure that you go look that up. But you can just take a Rubbermaid shoebox or a larger one, and you can put rice in it, or like I did, dried beans,
Mm-hmm.
or, play is messy, y'all. It's going to be messy, but it's worth it in the end. And then you just add those animals, or you add some plastic trees, or you add whatever that might go along with your unit for the month or whatever. And you have that sensory bucket there where kids were going to start acting out the stories. Same in dramatic play. It's not going to be one kid in Old Testament and another one in New Testament. No, these kids are actually going to act out the nativity or act out Moses and the bulrushes, and or the plagues, that's a fun one. Let's, pretend like everybody has lice, I don't know. But it's like, the kids are actually going to act them. In fact, they need to act them out. I would
Yes.
have parents come to me saying, my kids, in fact, this is during the day. Joy, do you remember Power Rangers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my word. I had so many parents come up to me saying, why are my kids kicking each other? And I'm like, my first question would be, do you let them watch Power Rangers? And they're like, yeah, how do you know? And I'm like, because kids are acting out what they see.
Yeah.
And so in kindergarten, first grade, especially, whatever they're learning and teaching or seeing at home, it's going to come out in their play. In fact, there are counselors who use play to help children deal with trauma, because play gets that trauma out, like it helps them work through what happened to them. So
Yes.
understand that when Joy and I are talking about these play stages, these faith stages, it really is true information, things that we really should be considering in our classrooms. Just to go on a little bit more with elementary, prayer stations, Bible stations, play stations. Again, you can find some of those on my website as well as on Pinterest. But it's going to take some planning. It's going to take some intentionality to really think through, okay, we definitely, with the older kids, we need to do this Bible narrative. And I will get on my soapbox and I will say, you need to be teaching in the Bible narrative way, creation all the way through, and keep cycling it through. Just go in order. Popcorn Bible lessons is not going to give your kids the foundational Bible narrative that they're going to need to build their faith on. And we're giving you all kinds of ideas on how to use play to do that, and so, especially with these older ones with the Bible narrative, if you go on my website, Old Testament all the way through, there's object lessons that you can do, and they're not hard. It's just you've got to be intentional with it. And, if you only have an hour with your kids, the most of the lessons that I have on my website are about 30-35 minutes long. Throw in some worship music songs, get Yancey's book to learn how to teach intentional worship with your children age appropriately. And then you get some games for fellowship time, play your stations, if you got your, and there's your hour, right, Joy?
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
that's it.
Yes, I feel like often we overschedule our kids, especially in Sunday schools, where if we gave our kids 10 minutes to actually respond to God in that moment, and in those days, they're not going to know how to be alone with God unless someone's teaching them that. And so I think in Sunday school, having these 10 minutes of a place to respond, and it could be with others, it could be playing, it could be, at these prayer stations,
right,
or in dramatic play, but giving kids space to learn how to respond to God on their own, so that they're not just getting this head knowledge, but actually having a chance to move it to their hearts as well.
Yeah. You know what? We could even, spiral notebooks are not all that expensive. Like, we could even get a spiral notebook for every kid in our class and give them 5 minutes. Older kids now, well, little kids could even do it too, that you just let them draw pictures, right?
Yeah.
And how cool would it be to, at the end of the school year, hand this notebook to a parent and say, this is your child growing in faith through the year.
Yes.
From when they started. Oh, that gives me goosebumps. I'm like, oh, that's such a cool idea.
And even in the nursery, we could take pictures and
you can take pictures
and stick them in there.
Yeah. And what a message that would send to parents. Not only, oh, wow, my church actually cares for my kids. That's definitely a message we want to share. But it also shows parents how important the faith development of their children, how important that is.
Yes.
And so definitely we as Bible teachers need to take our teaching, our planning, our ways we go about things, the connections we make with kids. We need to make sure that we're taking that seriously. Joy, is there anything else that you want to add into our conversation before I think this has been so jam-packed with all kinds of fun, cool stuff. So what else is there anything else?
I just want to encourage, I think that it's really important for teachers to be aware of both play and playfulness. And so while I think that child-led space play is super important and will help your kids grow and develop in their faith and in their connection with God, adding a bit of playfulness when we can't do full-blown play is super important as well. Like, it can be helpful as well. And that might even be as you're passing a kid in the hallway at church. You can incorporate that playfulness, and that helps to build this, understanding that church is a fun place. And God is all about life and joy and abundance and, someone that we want to spend time with, someone we want to learn and grow with. And when we bring that playfulness and enthusiasm to our Bible lessons, then it draws kids in, and it makes kids want to come back and want to find out what's happening in the Bible and to understand that story. And so playfulness is just so important. I mean, I just so strongly believe that it is like what helps God to become contagious to kids.
Yes.
And so that's my last little thing that I really wanted to say is even when we can't play, being sure to be, enthusiastic and playful with whatever we're doing. In these relationships with kids and their families is just going to just encourage kids and encourage that curiosity in kids.
Yes. And I think anything that we can do to make Jesus a positive thing is what we should be doing. We want
Yes.
kids to focus on Jesus. That's our whole goal in teaching the scriptures. No matter the Bible lesson, it is to get them to learn and know and love Jesus.
Yeah.
And understanding how kids learn and why they need play is God created them that way. He created them to play. He created us to play. And you know what? Sometimes, this is exactly why I think Jesus told the disciples, we have to have the faith of a child, right?
Yeah.
And children play. And how many of us in church or in Sunday school or whatever, we're just sitting, or I got to get up and read my Bible this morning, and it's like drudgery.
Yeah.
But we're supposed to come to him like a child with curiosity and an imagination and creativity and joy. And he wants to spend time with us, make those connections, which we can do with the kids in our ministry. Joy, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So grateful for you. Okay, so if people wanted to contact you or get in touch with you, how do they need to do that?
So email is great, joy@createdtoplay.com.
Okay.
I'm also on Instagram @createdtoplay, and then the blog createdtoplay.com.
Yes, and she's got all kinds of really cool stuff on there that you just need to go and peruse and look at because it's really good. Before we close out, I want to give everybody a little bit of a heads up because sessions 3 and 4 are going to be coming up over in the next couple of weeks. And if you're watching this video later on, make sure you find sessions 3 and 4 because I'm going to be talking with Julia Ball from Equip Family, and we're going to be talking about worldview questions and how we can build a foundational theology with our kids, which really is the next step. Like we've talked about these stages of faith, stages of play. So now let's get into, okay, what theology do we need to actually teach while we do the play stations and all the Play-Doh stuff and all the fun ooey gooey things that we get to do with kids that are a lot of fun, messy, but a lot of fun. So here is your final tip, because this is something that I have learned, that if you're going to do sensory boxes or something that's messy, put one of the plastic tablecloths on the floor. There's your tip right there.
Yes, 88 cents at Walmart.
That's right. That's right. You can go get those plastic tablecloths. They're amazing. So Joy, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your ministry and for spending time with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.